He found the bride in chains. She whispered, "I belong to you if you cut me free." The wind didn't howl that night, it screamed. A wagon lay overturned in the Badlands, its wheel shattered, its axle snapped like a dried bone. The canvas cover hung in tatters, flapping against the dry earth like a corpse's last breath. Inside, a single wedding veil clung to the splintered wood, white as snow, now stained with dust and something darker. Blood. Sweat. Tears. No one would ever know. The horses were gone. The driver too. And the bride, she was never found. They said she'd been headed to Fort Mercy, where a preacher waited with a ring and a Bible. They said her family sent her west for safety after the fever took her father. They said nothing else. No one came looking. Not the sheriff. Not the train men. Not even the priest who preached her name on Sunday mornings. Only the wind remembered her. Only the dust kept her company. For 3 days, the sun burned down like a hammer on an anvil. Crows circled overhead, silent as ghosts. A coyote came at dusk, sniffed the veil, licked a smear of rust from the wagon's hinge, then vanished into the scrub. No one saw the footprints leading away from the wreck. Or if they did, they pretended not to. By the 4th day, the veil was half buried. By the 5th, only the edges still fluttered, a ghost's lace in a world that had forgotten how to mourn. That's when he rode in. Not to find her. He didn't even know she existed. He rode because his horse needed water. Because his boots were split and his stomach hollow. Because he carried a dead wife's hair stitched into the leather, and because sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he swore he heard her whispering his name. He saw the wagon first. Then the veil. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching over cracked earth. He reached out, not to touch it, but to stop it from blowing away. His fingers hovered. Then he let go. The veil lifted again, spun once in the air, and settled deeper into the dust. He mounted up without a word. Didn't dig. Didn't pray. Just rode on. But that night, as he camped beneath a sky thick with stars, he dreamed of hands reaching from the dirt. Fingers curled like roots. Pale. Thin. Wearing a ring he couldn't see. When he woke, his throat was raw. His eyes were wet. And for the first time in years, he didn't reach for his whiskey. He reached for his knife. And stared at it. As if it owed him an answer. The next morning, the wind changed. It no longer smelled of dust. It smelled of smoke. And something sweet. Like burnt bread. Like a mother singing lullabies in a language long lost. He didn't speak of it. But he never forgot the veil. Or the silence that followed it. And somewhere, miles away, chained to iron and shame, a woman opened her eyes, and whispered his name. He preached forgiveness every Sunday. With a voice like gravel smoothed by river stones, he spoke of mercy. Of redemption. Of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. The town loved him. Children brought him wildflowers. Old women kissed his hand. Men tipped their hats and called him Reverend. No one knew what happened when the sun set. No one saw him lock the church doors behind him. No one heard the chains rattle in the cellar. She wasn't his wife. She wasn't his daughter. She wasn't even a sinner, he'd made sure of that. She was the girl who'd stumbled into town 2 winters ago, barefoot and bleeding, clutching a child's doll made of rags. She'd begged for food. For shelter. For God's grace. He gave her bread. Then he gave her chains. At first, he told himself she was dangerous. That she carried plague. That the Lord had sent her to test him. He locked her in the cellar beneath the church. Tied her wrists with iron rings bolted to the wall. Fed her scraps. Gave her water once a day. Never looked her in the eye. He read scripture aloud each night. Never prayed for her. Only prayed she wouldn't die before Sunday. Because if she died, who would remind him? Who would make him feel the weight of his own sin? He didn't hate her. He feared her. Because she never cried. Never screamed. Never begged. She just sat. Staring. Waiting. And when he stood above her, Bible open, voice trembling, she'd lift her chin, just slightly, and say nothing. But her eyes, oh, her eyes. They held a quiet truth he dared not face. That he was the one who'd broken the commandments. Not her. He was the one who turned sanctuary into prison. One night, after the congregation left, he knelt beside her. He touched her forehead. Cold. Dry. Like stone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She didn't move. He pulled back. Left. Closed the door. Locked it. Turned the key. And walked upstairs to his bed. Where he wept until dawn. The next morning, he preached about love. About patience. About the lamb that strayed. He didn't mention chains. Didn't mention blood. Didn't mention the way her ribs rose under her dress like wings trapped under glass. But that evening, as he descended the stairs, he saw something new. A single white feather. Lying on the floor. Beside her chained feet. He picked it up. Held it. Tried to remember where he'd seen feathers like that before. Then he realized. It was from a dove. The same kind his wife had kept in a cage. Before he killed it. Because it sang too loud. And he couldn't stand the noise. He dropped the feather. Walked away. But he didn't lock the door that night. He left it cracked. Just enough. For the wind to slip through. And carry her voice. To him. He rode into town with nothing but a rifle, a canteen half full, and a pair of boots stitched with his dead wife's hair. They were worn thin at the soles. Cracked at the heels. Smelled of salt and sorrow. He'd sewn them himself, months after burying her. Each strand of her hair, woven into the leather, was a prayer. He wore them everywhere. Even in the rain. Even when they blistered his feet. Because if he took them off, he'd forget her. And forgetting her felt worse than dying. He didn't come to town for gold. Didn't come for work. Came because the land was calling him south. Said the wind carried voices there. Said someone had seen a woman in white, walking alone through the dust. He didn't believe it. Until he saw her. She was bent over a well, her arms wrapped around herself, shoulders shaking. Not from cold. From hunger. Her dress was torn. Her hair matted with dust. Her wrists, raw, red, swollen. Chains still dangled from them. Not metal. Rope. Coiled tight. As if someone had tried to bind her soul. He stopped his horse. Didn't speak. Just watched. She lifted her head. Slowly. Like a deer sensing a hunter. And when her eyes met his, something inside him broke. Not the way a bone snaps. But the way a promise does. When you realize you've spent your whole life breaking it. Her lips moved. No sound came out. But he knew. He'd seen that look before. On his wife's face. The night she died. Not from illness. From silence. From being forgotten. He slid off his horse. Dropped his canteen. Walked toward her. Every step heavier than the last. He didn't offer food. Didn't ask her name. Didn't try to free her. He just knelt. And unstrapped his boots. Set them gently on the ground before her. Then turned. Walked away. Back to his horse. He didn't look back. But he felt her eyes on him. Long after he rode out of sight. That night, he slept under the stars. And dreamt of her wearing his boots. Walking barefoot through fire. Without screaming. Without stopping. He woke with tears on his cheeks. And the sudden, terrible understanding, he hadn't come to save her. He'd come to find the part of himself he'd buried with his wife. And she was it. She begged for a crust. Just one. Tiny. Hard. Old. The baker stood behind his counter, flour dusting his beard like ash. He looked at her. At the chains. At the hollows under her eyes. At the way her fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from knowing she'd never be fed again. He didn't call the sheriff. Didn't throw her out. Just handed her a cup of water. "Drink," he said. She stared at it. Then at him. "You're kind," she whispered. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm afraid." She didn't understand. Not then. He poured the water slow, careful, like it might spill. Like if he gave her more, he'd have to see her face every time he closed his eyes. And if he saw her face, he'd have to remember. Remember the boy he'd buried last winter. His own son. Starved to death. While he sold bread to men who laughed. While he locked his doors. While he told himself he was doing right. She drank. Slowly. Every sip a prayer. He watched. Then he turned. Walked to the back room. Brought out a loaf. Fresh. Still warm. Set it on the counter. Pushed it toward her. She didn't move. He stepped back. "Take it," he said. She looked at him. Then at the bread. Then back at him. And whispered, "You don't want me to eat it." He didn't answer. But his hands clenched. Because she was right. If she ate it, she'd live. And if she lived, he'd have to choose. Save her. Or bury her. Like everything else. So he walked away. Left the bread. Walked out the back door. Let the wind take it. She didn't touch it. Just sat. Staring. At the loaf. At the man. At the silence between them. And when the sun dipped low, she whispered, "I belong to you, if you cut me free." He didn't hear her. But his heart did. And it broke. Again. And again. And again. That night, the fire crackled low. Outside, coyotes sang their lullaby. Inside, the chain dragged across dirt as she shifted. He sat across from her, silent. Didn't look at her. Didn't dare. But he heard every scrape. Every sigh. Every breath that came too slow. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't beg. Just breathed. Like she was learning how to live again. He gripped his knife. Felt the edge against his palm. Thought about cutting her loose. Thought about killing her to end it. Thought about killing the preacher first. But the blade didn't want blood. It wanted freedom. And so did he. She turned her head. Looked at him. Not with fear. Not with hate. With recognition. As if she'd known him before. In another life. Another war. Another world. "I belong to you," she whispered. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. "If you cut me free." The words didn't echo. They sank. Into the fire. Into the dirt. Into his bones. He closed his eyes. Saw his wife's face. Saw his son's small hands. Saw the preacher's cellar. Saw the veil in the dust. He opened his eyes. Reached for the knife. Felt its weight. Then let it fall. To his lap. He didn't cut her. Didn't speak. Just leaned back. Let the fire dim. Let the night swallow them both. And when dawn came, she was gone. Only the chain remained. Lying in the ashes. Still warm. Still humming. Like a song nobody remembered how to sing. His horse whinnied when she passed. The mare refused to drink near her. Even the stray dog that followed him for weeks turned tail and ran when she cried out in her sleep. Animals don't lie. They sense the weight of souls. And hers? It bent the air around her like heat off desert stone. He noticed it first on the third day. He tied his horse to the post outside the saloon. When she walked past, the animal reared. Snorted. Eyes wide. Not scared. Recognizing. Like she was something holy. Or cursed. He didn't understand. Until the night he dreamed of her standing at the edge of a cliff. Surrounded by animals. All of them bowed. Bleeding. Waiting. And then she turned. Looked at him. And whispered, "You're the only one who can undo this." He woke gasping. His chest heavy. His hands shaking. He went to the stable. Found his horse staring at the empty space where she'd slept. The mare nuzzled the ground. Where her footprint had been. And licked it. As if tasting memory. The next morning, he found a trail. Not human. Animal. Deer. Foxes. Even a mountain lion. All had passed through the same patch of sand. Leading to the church. He followed. And there, beneath the chapel's eaves, he saw it. A circle of paw prints. Surrounding the door. As if something had guarded her. Or waited for her. To be free. He stood there. Alone. Wind howling. And for the first time since his wife died, he prayed. Not to God. To her. To whatever spirit lived inside that broken body. Please, he thought. Don't let me be too late. Don't let me be the one who lets you disappear. But the wind answered. Not with words. With silence. And the distant sound of chains. Dragging. Across stone. He found it buried beneath the hearthstones, a child's drawing, charred at the edges, ink blurred by tears. A stick figure family. One figure held a noose. The other, a key. He didn't read it until the fire died. Then he wept. Not for her. For himself. Because he'd written it. And forgotten. The paper was brittle. The pencil strokes shaky. He recognized the handwriting. His own. From 10 years ago. Before the war. Before the fever. Before the chains. He'd drawn this for his daughter. Before she died. Before he buried her in a shallow grave beneath the willow tree. He'd carved her name on a wooden cross. Then burned it. Couldn't bear to look. Hadn't remembered the drawing. Until now. The figures were simple. Two people. One holding a rope. One holding a key. Below, scrawled in childish letters, "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." He choked. Kneeled. Pressed the paper to his chest. He hadn't drawn that. She had. She'd drawn him. The man who bound her. The man who locked her. The man who forgot. And still, she wrote it. Still, she hoped. He staggered to his feet. Grabbed his rifle. Walked to the church. Didn't knock. Didn't hesitate. Broke the door down. Found the preacher sleeping. Unshaven. Drunk. Chain still dangling from his belt. He raised the rifle. Finger on the trigger. The preacher stirred. Opened his eyes. Looked up. Didn't plead. Didn't beg. Just whispered, "She's not yours to kill." He lowered the gun. Walked out. Left the preacher alive. But took the key from his pocket. And walked into the storm. He wore a badge. Held a gun. Saw the chains. Saw the bruises. Saw the hollow eyes. And still, he tipped his hat and rode on. "Not my business," he told the preacher. "She ain't legal property." But he knew the truth. He was afraid. Afraid if he freed her, he'd have to admit what he'd let happen, and what he'd done himself. 10 years ago, he'd found a girl. Same age. Same eyes. Barefoot. Bleeding. He'd taken her in. Fed her. Clothed her. Let her sleep in the jail cell. Then he'd locked her in. Told himself he was protecting her. Then he'd hurt her. Not with fists. With silence. With neglect. With the quiet cruelty of a man who thinks he's doing good. She ran. Vanished. He never found her. But he saw her face every night. In mirrors. In dreams. In the eyes of women who passed through town. He carried her ghost like a bullet lodged in his heart. Now here she was. Again. Worse. More broken. And he knew, if he freed her, he'd have to face himself. And he wasn't ready. So he rode away. Left the preacher to his sins. Left the girl to her chains. Left the world to rot. That night, he sat alone in his cabin. Poured himself a drink. Didn't taste it. Just stared at the badge pinned to his coat. The star. The symbol. The lie. He reached for his pistol. Put it to his temple. Held it there. Breathed. Then lowered it. Didn't pull the trigger. But he whispered, "I'm sorry." To no one. To everyone. To the girl. To the ghost. To the boy he used to be. He left town at dawn. Didn't look back. But he left his badge on the table. And the key. Tucked inside his coat. For whoever found him next. He held it for 3 days. Woke with it in his hand. Slept with it pressed against his ribs. He thought about cutting her loose. Thought about killing her to end it. Thought about killing the preacher first. But the blade didn't want blood. It wanted freedom. And so did he. It remembered. Remembered the first time he used it. Cutting his wife's hair before burial. Remembered carving her name into a tree. Remembered slicing his palm during the funeral. Blood on the soil. Prayer in the wind. Now it remembered her. The way her skin looked under moonlight. The way she didn't flinch when he came near. The way she whispered his name, without knowing it. He didn't speak. Didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Just held the knife. Watching. Waiting. Wondering. Was he saving her? Or just freeing himself? On the 4th morning, he walked to the church. No rifle. No armor. Just the knife. And his boots. The preacher was gone. Door unlocked. Chains gone. Only a single shoe left on the floor. White. Broken. Like hope. He stepped inside. Knelt. Found her. On the floor. Wrapped in a blanket. Breathing. Alive. Her eyes opened. Slow. Clear. She smiled. Not happy. Not sad. Just, free. He reached for her. Hand trembling. Knife still in his grip. She lifted her hand. Not to touch him. To take the knife. Gently. Placed it in his palm. Then closed his fingers around it. I belong to you, she whispered. If you cut me free. He looked at the blade. At her. At the sunrise creeping through the window. And for the first time, he didn't think about the past. He thought about tomorrow. He stood. Carried her out. Into the light. And began to walk. Away. From the church. From the town. From the chains. He didn't look back. But he knew, she was no longer his burden. She was his salvation. And the knife? It didn't bleed anymore. It sang. No shoes. No water. No name left to call her own. She stepped into the dust storm like it was a church aisle. Behind her, the preacher's house burned. Ahead, nothing but wind and silence. He watched from the ridge, rifle heavy, heart heavier. She didn't look back. But the wind carried her whisper, clear as a bell, I belong to you, if you cut me free. He didn't move. Didn't shout. Didn't chase. Didn't pray. He just stood. And let the storm take her. The veil lifted. Flowed behind her like wings. The dust swallowed her ankles. Her waist. Her shoulders. Her face. And then, nothing. Only the wind. Only the fire. Only the echo of a promise. He turned. Walked down the ridge. To the place where he'd left his horse. He didn't saddle it. Just sat. Under the stars. And cried. Not for her. Not for himself. But for all the moments he'd missed. All the silences he'd chosen. All the chains he'd let others wear. He took the knife from his belt. Opened it. Slid the blade across his palm. Let the blood drip onto the earth. One drop. Then another. Then none. He closed his eyes. Whispered her name. For the first time. And meant it. When dawn came, he mounted his horse. Rode east. Not toward town. Not toward home. But toward the horizon. Where the dust still danced. And somewhere, a woman walked. Free. And finally, belonged to no one. But herself. And the wind. And the silence. That had waited so long to hold her.